I would like to welcome you all to this exciting event being held by McPherson Independent. Come and grab a seat. Now, I would love, so I should say this is, the next event being held by McPherson Independent, Solar Revolution. We're very excited to have so many of you here today, and this is one of a number of events we're going to be holding over the coming months. So we're looking forward to engaging with the community more and talking about things that are important to the community here in McPherson. I'd like you all to get your phones out if possible. Just to kick things off, we'd love you to scan this QR code. You don't need to download a new app, but we have 2 questions that we'd love to start off with. So if you can try to scan that QR code, and we'll see what the first question is. How are we going? All scanned that, and we'll bring up our first question. All good to go? And we'll bring up the first question if everyone's managed that. Yep. So our first question is, what's the maximum level of renewables that we have had in our grid? If you can have your best guess at the maximum level of renewables we've had in our grid. We've got people putting in their best guesses. Yeah, national roads. Oh, we've got a few more answers, a few more guesses coming in. Great, and we'll show what the answer is. Thanks, Lachlan. There we go. 72.1%. So there we go. That was the answer to that question, and I'm sure we'll have. Yeah, let's go solar. Yep. I'm sure we'll have a deeper dive onto some of these interesting numbers a little bit later. Now, our next question, our final question, is in one word, what would you like to hear today from our incredible guest speakers? So, what are you hoping to hear today? Oh, some great words. Hope, progress, more about storage, best deals, innovation, just transition, excellent. These are all amazing words. I'm sure we'll dive into some of these themes a bit later. I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name's Amanda. I'm a member of the growing McPherson Independent Group, and there's a few of us here in the room tonight. If you can wave your hands, we've got a few in the back, we've got Mara here. Very briefly, I've become involved in McPherson Independent because I think we can do so much better here on the Southern Gold Coast. I feel like the major parties largely one and the same these days, and we've seen the power of community independence across the country and what they've been able to bring and what they've been able to deliver for their communities. So I'm excited to see what's possible here on the Southern Gold Coast. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're meeting today on Coomba country, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded. I would now like to hand over to the amazing Mara Boone, who's also a member of McPherson Independent, and she's going to be leading our incredible panel today. So thank you, Mara.
Thank you so much, Amanda. So we have here like a wonderful group of local business leaders, community leaders, and of course Tim Buckley, who joins us from Sydney. Tim is the director energy finance. I've known Tim for a few decades now, and he is extraordinary. He's a very senior financial analyst. So he was a managing director at Citigroup, where he led research on equities for many years. He knows investment across many sectors, and probably 10 years ago or so, he just became very passionate about climate finance. And so Tim has come to help us present context on how this transition is happening here on the southern end of the Gold Coast. And so, Tim, starting with you, I guess we hear so much about the world and what China's doing, what America's doing, you know. Help us to understand what is happening in the US and China, maybe in India, and, you know, how does that set the scene for how the planet is addressing the transition to renewables?
I'm glad you threw in India. I was looking at that this morning, of all things. So we are actually in the middle of a global investment technology race to the top. 2 years ago, nowhere near as much, but you hopefully have heard of the US Inflation Reduction Act. That is $1 trillion, $1 trillion of public government intervention to stimulate and reindustrialize the American economy, to bring them back into the race. But it's back into the race because China is absolutely winning the race at the moment. China is running very, very fast, world leader in almost every zero emissions technology industry of the future. And so President Biden brought in a smaller version of the Green New Deal, but a smaller, by American standards, $1 trillion of subsidies and capital support from the government. Now, the home of the free market, and all of a sudden you've got $1 trillion of intervention. So when I hear about Australia saying, oh, we're just going to leave it to the free market, we're going to leave it to the markets, they know how to do things. We don't want the government picking losers because they're really good at picking losers. There is no free market. Mara and I have been debating them. The World Trade Organization is dead. The IRA has killed it. It is all about intervening and undermining free trade because America is in trade war with China. Now, to me, it's absolutely critical Australia chart a different path. It's worth bearing in mind, China is the second largest country in the world. It is also our #1 trade partner. And Japan and Korea are our #2 and #3 trade partners. So we live in the Asian century. Our economy is an export economy. America is a domestic, it's the biggest economy in the world, but it's a massive domestic market. So if you think about, they can reindustrialize their economy for supply of their needs. Australia exports to North Asia, and that is the driver of our economy. So we've got to chart a different course. So the Chinese response, I won't go too deep into China, but I actually am going there in 2 weeks' time. It is staggering to watch. Their response to the IRA is to go twice as fast. So for every dollar America invested in clean tech industries last year, China invested $2. For every new coal-fired power plant China built last year, and they built a lot of them, don't get me wrong, they walk in both sides of the street, as are we, but for every coal plant they built 6 wind and solar plants every week last year. That's up 100% on what they were doing only 1 year earlier. So their response to the IRA is to go twice as fast. Now, you could say, are they doing it for climate? It's one of their reasons, but I'd say #1, they're doing it for investment. #2, employment. #3, technology. #4, exports. #5, because they want to rule the world. They want to dominate all these industries. By the way, it helps the planet, gives us a livable planet if we win. So I'm not trying to pretend China is the best country in the world. It's not. Every country's got its faults, but China absolutely dominates the world in these technologies. And so I'll finish on India, because I happen to be looking at India. I've studied India for a decade. And Prime Minister Modi, just going through his re-election, he'll be re-elected for the 3rd term this month. About 5 or 6 years ago, he set a vision for India to be the renewable energy superpower of the world. Now, I was studying India. They have absolutely the economics behind them. They have the energy security needs behind them. They have the workforce, the investment. They are one of the biggest importers of fossil fuels in the world. So in the last 3 months, China built 10 gigawatts of solar in 3 months. Now, we do 5 gigs a year as a country. they did 10 gigs, twice what we do in a year, and they did it in 3 months. Now, that is about a third of what Prime Minister Modi wants to do every single year. So Modi's got the vision. He's failed 5 years in a row to deliver it. The first quarter of this year, happened to be very pleasantly surprised. But it's all about energy security. It's all energy security, energy independence, and if it happens to decarbonise the world, even better.
Let me follow up briefly on India because we share a bit of a passion on Indian policy. Like in Australia, there's some billionaires active in India, right? Of course, we've all known about Adani and the coal that he's opened here. He also is investing big in renewables, and Mukesh Ambani, a bit like Andrew Forrester, Twiggy, has a huge bet on green hydrogen, electrolyzers. Tim, what do you make of the private capital in India, given its scale? You know, just so we have a bit of perspective on what we're doing here.
Yeah, I have studied and been to India many times in the last decade. I was talking to some philanthropists and said, do we really want to barrack for billionaires? But in India, you've actually got 2 billionaires that control the country. They're 2 of the 2 richest people in Asia. Say that again, 2 of the 2 richest people in Asia are both Indians, Mukesh Ambani and Gautam Adani. Gautam Adani invited me to Gujarat last December to actually kiss and make up, because I've been fighting with him for a decade. He doesn't quite like me and I don't quite like him, but he said, look, at the end of the day, we're just going to win this fight. Why don't we actually work on what we agree on together? I won't go down that further. I ended up agreeing, and then he reneged on part of his deal. He threw a couple of journalists in jail for criminal defamation, which there is no such thing, but anyway, so I then pulled out. But I seriously think that if India barracking for billionaires, 2 billionaires, and you said they're compared to Twiggy Forrest, like Mukesh Ambani's 5 times more wealth than Twiggy Forrest. Do you think Twiggy's a bit addicted to the climate addiction? Mukesh Ambani goes, I'm going to chuck $100 billion on climate solutions for India in the next decade. Now, we often hear from our politicians the idea it doesn't matter what Australia does, it's what China and India and America do that counts. Well, the richest man in Asia says he's chucking $100 billion on the table. Now, part of the deal that I did with Gautam Adani was he only chucked $70 billion on the table this decade. Well, you match Ambani, I might consider working with you. And so what's he done? Thrown $100 billion. That's his offer. But these guys actually have the money, and India has the need, and it is absolutely economically sensible to do it, and it's politically sensible. As I said, India's the second largest fossil fuel import nation in the world. They don't want to be addicted to Middle East oil.
Okay, so here we are in Australia, and I know I have a North American accent. I've been here for 34 years, here on the Gold Coast for 18 years, and I actually am Brazilian, so there, you know. But we're not America. We're not the big global superpower with the currency and the arms, right? We're definitely not a country with 1 billion people, China, India, and huge, you know, kind of force of economy. We're a trading nation, we're small, but we've got huge amounts of land. Tim, let's talk a little bit more about solar and what is unique about solar in Australia, because when you go to these conferences around the world, people are like, oh, you are the people who are leading the rooftop solar, but here we lose that perspective. Like, what has happened here with solar over the last, 10, 20 years?
You probably, hopefully, have heard that Australia leads the world in solar, rooftop solar. I think maybe in the next couple of months, this electorate will be the highest electorate in the world in terms of rooftop solar.
Did you know that?
I'm a finance analyst, I like to make numbers up, but it's probably correct, and I think we can pass to Judy to fact check that one. But yeah, Australia does lead the world in rooftop solar, and this electorate potentially, and that is the massive opportunity. But when I work with the Australian Energy Market Operator, their forecast is that rooftop solar in Australia will increase 400 to 500% by 2050. So we're the highest in the world per capita, and their central model says that it's going to, so we saw that beautiful chart, 42% of the 72% came from rooftop solar, and they're saying we're going to expand that 4 or 5 times think they're right on the number, they're wrong on the decade. They'll be out by a decade, we'll deliver a decade earlier. And that disrupts everything. And so, again, Peter and I were talking before this, and we were talking about batteries. Batteries merge with solar. A bit closer?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Got a loud voice, but I'll use the mic. Think about a technology disruption. Solar is a massive technology disruption. Add electric vehicles. What are they powered by? Batteries. You have a technology revolution in batteries underway right now. Put batteries together with solar and you've got a total system disruption.
So, because we're going to now start moving to the rest of the panel, but before we get there, Tim, you know, we hear a lot about, well, what happens when the sun is down and the wind isn't blowing, and how do we kind of firm that up in the background, and how are we going to get through, and is it reasonable that we can make this transition?
I think, Anish, you made the comment, it's not going to be easy. We're moving fast, we've got to move faster. It's going to be difficult, without doubt. But the technology disruption that is underway, I find inspiring. It's staggering. What we were dreaming about, what I was dreaming about 15 years ago, is entirely available today. 2 years ago, people were, we don't have the manufacturing capacity. We can't build enough solar and batteries. Absolute wrong. I won't swear. Absolutely wrong. China has doubled the amount of solar module manufacturing that they are building every year in the last 2 years. They're doubling it again in the next 2 years. The world is not doubling, they're doubling the amount of battery manufacturing capacity every 18 months. So that's manufacturing, that's repeat every month, every year, every decade. And so there is actually, the International Energy Agency says there's more solar manufacturing capacity and more battery manufacturing capacity available today than we need to solve for 1.5 degrees, which is unbelievable.
Okay, that is like really interesting context. The very last question for you, Tim, is, you know, as a trading nation, which has a small domestic market but a huge global kind of impact through our exports, how do we build a stake in a new value chain? What can be possible if we have ubiquitous, low-cost renewable energy?
Dorothy Dixon, of course, Tara and I have been talking, and I said to her, look, I've committed my organisation, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'll be talking about green iron every single day for the next year, because that is $100 billion a year export opportunity for Australia. So, at the moment, you're probably aware Australia's the world #1 iron ore exporter in the world. We export $125 billion of iron ore every year. We do precisely zero value add. We dig it up, we ship it off to China. Zero value add. If we actually used our world-leading wind, solar, low population density, capital markets, we've got all of those, to do a little bit of processing onshore, we could export green iron rather than iron ore. Now, I'm not saying green steel. We'll get to steel. We have, that's your business. Philippe will talk to the steel processing industry in Australia, but for every, we produce what, 5 or 10 million tonnes of steel in Australia, but we export 1,000 million tonnes of iron ore. So just think like 50 times. So the opportunity is to actually help China, Japan, Korea, and India decarbonise their steel industry. So it's not compete with their steel industry, it's to collaborate with them. To collaborate, partner with them, have them invest here. We've actually got to welcome China, Japan, and Korea to invest here. Value add, use our labour, our workforce, our critical minerals, our steel. That is $100 billion a year opportunity for Australia, and we then help drive decarbonisation of North Asia, and that helps solve the global climate crisis.
So, yeah, and now let's start introducing the rest of our panel and how this plays out here in McPherson, in our southern Gold Coast community. So, Felipe Santoni is not only a Brazilian, yay, but a long-term resident here in the Gold Coast, and he leads sustainability at Neumann Steel. And, you know, the Neumann family have multiple industries, I'm told.